Ladies and gentlemen, Welsh Rugby, as we know it, is going to change in the foreseeable future. Or so it seems. The WRU have proposed a radical overhaul of Welsh Rugby, ladies and gents. In a recent press conference, they announced 5 different options that they have been considering to change the game of Welsh Rugby. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Chip Over the Top Rugby podcast. My name is Ryan. If you are new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for up-to-date, relevant changes in Welsh Rugby. Now, that opening statement that I made has been probably a long time coming. Let's be real, right? As a fan of Welsh Rugby, but also someone who analyses, has my own podcast, the Chip Over the Top Rugby podcast, I sort of been staying abreast of what is going on in Welsh Rugby. And as we know, internationally, right, underperforming. Only one game that we've won in the past 3 years, 2 or 3 years, against Japan this summer. Regionally, underperforming, right? Haven't won the URC. Not good enough. Haven't won in Europe in a long time. Not good enough. There is no professional Welsh women's rugby game in Wales. And the sort of concept of the SRC hasn't sort of hit the upper echelons of where the WRU thought. And that is why, ladies and gents, they have come out with this radical idea to overhaul Welsh Rugby as we know it. They have given 5 options, as I said. Let's briefly discuss them. And then I'm going to offer my opinion at the end based on sort of what I've sort of viewed and what I think potentially is going to be the way forward. So let's dive in. Option A, ladies and gents, is to maintain as is. Now, bearing in mind, right, the WRU want to overhaul the Welsh women's game. They want to overhaul the men's professional game, but they also want to sort of bring about grassroots development and to increase that competition level at the SRC. So just bear that in mind when I discuss these 4 options, because it seems, even though there is a consultation period right now with the WRU for the next 6 weeks, on the whole, Welsh Rugby needs to change. There is no denying that. As a fan, as a podcaster, that needs to happen. And I believe you probably all agree with me, right? Each option, except the last 2, only affects the men's professional game. Bear that in mind. Option A, 4 regions with unequal funding. So currently, ladies and gents, Cardiff, who went into administration in April, WRU sort of saved them, which is good for Welsh Rugby, let's be real. The Dragons currently have signed the PRA agreement, which is the funding agreement, and they also own Rodney Parade. Scarlet Ospreys did not sign the PRA agreement. They were slightly late on that. Ospreys have just got new proposals to develop St. Helens as their future ground, which I think is great for them. And the Scarlets, right? Probably the best team this past year in the URC, potentially, for Wales, anyway. And so, with the 4 regions with unequal funding, how do you dictate which 2 get more funding, which 2 get less? It retains the current 4 professional teams, so there's no changes. There's no swapping or chopping or creating new regions, right? It is what it is. For the women's game, that equals no significant changes, right? There's no changes there. It is what it is. It stays as is. That will be so there's no professional game of women's rugby in Wales, right? Most of the professional players are overseas, but they're in England, playing in England. And then obviously you have the 2 sort of teams that are representing the Celtic Challenge, that is Gwalia Lightning and Brython Thunder, right? That remains unchanged. That's just the way it is. So that's like a feeder system for the Wales sort of professional setup in Welsh women's rugby. The SRC will remain as is. So option A is 4 regions, unequal funding. The men's is the primary change here. Option B is 3 regions, with equal funding, and this is where you sort of go a bit, okay, are we losing one of the current regions? Are they creating 3 new regions, which it's hard and it's a bit of pill to swallow for regional fans, right? Because you're like, okay, completely getting rid of the current setup. Do you go east, west, north? Or do you go Cardiff Dragons, Ospreys, Cardiff Dragons, Scarlets, or any variation of those, right? No significant changes to the women's rugby setup. The SRC remains unchanged, and the Celtic Challenge continues as the sort of feeder for the women's professional game. Now, before I go into option C and option D and D+, initially when the regional proposal was made, I always thought, it should have been something like an Irish setup. But unfortunately, that argument is sort of thrown out because in Ireland, there were obviously provinces, right? And those provinces already had the teams. With the regional rugby setup, they had to create new teams, new identities, new playing styles, new names, etc. Right? So let me just throw that out there. Now, option C, 3 regions with unequal funding, right? Personally, I think option C is sort of out the window, because why would, as a fan and a supporter of regional rugby, why would you want to go and watch and see a team that has less funding than the 2 other teams in the same competition? I just don't think you would want to do that. Now, my good friend Christian on the Rugby Sports Podcast, Welsh Sports Podcast, sorry, has come out and said, okay, this option would probably be the best option because you have potentially 2 elite teams, right? 2 elite teams with significant more funding and 1 sort of development team with significantly less funding, but still professional rugby, decent standard, could be the underdog story. Everybody loves an underdog story, and I get it. It makes sense. But with that, again, you're not changing Welsh rugby on the whole, you're only changing and altering men's professional rugby. Which is fair enough, that's where the bread and butter is, right? Let's be real. But it's no secret we need to develop the game in general in Wales. There needs to be more funding at grassroots. There needs to be more funding in the women's game. There needs to be more funding in the SRC, because if you're trying to bridge that gap between regional and semi-professional and professional, you just need to inject more money in the SRC. So option C so far is probably the best option. Option D. This is where we sort of see changes on the whole. Option D, 2 regions with equal funding. And this is where things get a bit messy, because currently there are 4 regions with 4 identities: the Ospreys, Scarlets, Dragons, Cardiff. Do you completely eliminate 2 regions and leave 2 as is, or do you create 2 new regions, 2 new elite professional teams? Now, we look at Scotland here, right? Because initially they had the Borders as well, but they're left with Glasgow Warriors and Edinburgh. But those are the 2 main cities in Scotland, so it kind of makes sense. With Wales, now the two regions, do you create entirely 2 new regions? Probably that would be the way to go. That would be the way to go, but the buy-in is going to be very difficult unless the funding in the SRC is so significant that some of those players that will miss out on going into the regions drop down and play in the SRC, and the SRC competition and standard of rugby goes up and is near enough on par with those elite teams. Obviously, the players are going to be not elite, potentially, but the standard goes up. With the two regions with equal funding, it consolidates the professional teams into two regions, whether they're two new regions or two current. Option D also establishes two fully funded professional women's rugby teams in Wales, which is fantastic for the Welsh women's game. Let's just remember that. With the SRC, there is also enhanced budgeting, staffing, funding. So the SRC competition goes up, which bridges the gap. So semi-professional rugby, local sort of teams get a boost. Does that mean more people go to those regions, to those teams and watch them? Who knows? And obviously the Celtic Challenge will change, because I would imagine that those teams will then go underneath and sort of be academy developmental teams for the women's teams. And finally is D+, ladies and gents. The ultimate is what the WRU wants here. But is it what the fans want? Is it what you and I want? It's similar to option D, but with enhanced additional support mechanisms. The women's game, two professional teams. The SRC, extra enhancements, extra funding, extra budgeting for those teams, which means that they can bring in more quality standard of players, which bridges the gap between semi-pro and professional. Some of those players will probably be on professional contracts as marquee players. Do you then sort of look at the SRC and say, okay, let's create an Anglo-Welsh Cup based out of those teams? Who knows? We don't know. There is also the Celtic Challenge stays the same. But what happens in D+ is that there is a national sort of academy, a national campus, where the two professional teams, the two regions, have consolidated resources, both for men's and women's as well. Now, the unfortunate thing is, as someone who is a fan of Welsh rugby on the whole, not just men's rugby, right? That is primarily what I watch though. Option D+ is probably the best for the game on the whole. But it's probably not the best for men's elite competition. I think there needs to be sort of a blend between D+ and C. Because I think if you have two elite teams, one development team, you keep more fans happy. But you also do need to increase the budget for the SRC, and you also need to establish a women's professional game. So it's got to be a blend. I don't think there's one right answer here. Let me know your thoughts below. And on another sort of tangent, I think the URC needs to go. Or not necessarily go, but I think Welsh Rugby needs to leave the URC. I have seen it time and time again where, regional attendance is poor. Not many fans want to travel to South Africa. Not many fans want to travel to Scotland and Ireland to watch the games either. You know what I mean? At the moment, far more fans would be enticed to travel over to England, to go watch Bath play or Bristol play against one of the regions than they would elsewhere. That is just my 2 cents. Let me know your thoughts below, ladies and gents. It's going to be an interesting 6 weeks of consultations to see what actually happens in Welsh Rugby. I'm also nervous for it. I would be sad to see some of the regions go. But I would also like to potentially see a region created in North Wales. So it's a toss-up really, isn't it? What actually needs to happen? Time will tell, ladies and gents. Time will tell. Triple the Top Rugby Podcast. Let me know your thoughts below. And I'll catch you very, very soon. Peace.